Picture this. It's 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. The errands are done, the group chats have gone quiet, and out of nowhere, this hollow, creeping dread just settles in. You're not tired, you're not sick, you just feel completely, inexplicably empty. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl had a name for this. He called it Sunday neurosis, the existential hangover that hits the moment your schedule stops forcing you to move. And here's the thing, almost everyone in the modern world knows exactly what I'm talking about. But there's a small island in southern Japan where that feeling doesn't exist. Not because those people are wealthier or more enlightened or running some elite wellness protocol. It's because they have a fundamentally different answer to the question, what am I actually here for? That question is what this whole video is about. The village that broke the rules. The island is Okinawa, specifically a tiny rural town called Ogimi, sometimes called the Village of Longevity because it holds a Guinness World Record for life expectancy. But when researchers actually went there, they didn't find frail old people resting in rocking chairs. They found 90-year-olds riding motorcycles, centenarians aggressively tending vegetable gardens, communities of people who were genuinely vibrating with aliveness. Two authors, Héctor García and Francesc Miralles, traveled to Ogimi and spent months conducting over 100 interviews with these supercentenarians. What they found became a book called Ikigai, the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. Ikigai. Loosely translated, it means the happiness of always being busy. But before you roll your eyes, this is not hustle culture with a Japanese accent. This isn't grind until you drop. This is something completely different. This is about finding a reason to exist that's so deeply yours, it pulls you out of bed every single morning without an alarm. There are 4 big ideas in this book, and by the time we're done, I think you'll look at your Monday morning completely differently. Let's get into it.
The retirement lie. Here's the deal with retirement. We've built an entire culture around it. Work is the punishment, the beach is the reward. You put in your 40 years, and then finally you get to do nothing. Except that's not actually the reward we think it is. The longest living people on Earth don't retire, not because they can't, but because they genuinely don't want to. In the Japanese language, there isn't even a word that means leaving work forever, because to them, the concept doesn't make sense. You don't stop doing the thing that gives your life meaning just because you hit a certain age. Think about what actually happens to the brain when you suddenly stop. You've been operating at 70 miles per hour, and then you just shift into neutral. The engine doesn't rest, it idles, it deteriorates. The brain needs novelty, challenge, and engagement to stay sharp. Without a new problem to solve, it starts to consume itself. But I want to go deeper than biology here. I want to talk about Viktor Frankl, because his story is one of the most extraordinary case studies in human purpose I've ever encountered. Frankl was a psychiatrist. He was also a prisoner at Auschwitz. Before the war, he had spent years developing a complete psychological framework, logotherapy, built around the idea that meaning, not pleasure, is the primary drive of human beings. He'd written a manuscript, his life's work. When he arrived at the concentration camp, it was confiscated immediately. Most people would have collapsed. Frankl became obsessed. Even while starving, even when he contracted typhus, he would hunt down scraps of paper and jot down keywords from his lost manuscript, determined to rewrite it if he survived. And he watched what happened to the people around him. The ones who lost their purpose, who had no reason to make it to tomorrow, died first. The ones who had something to finish, someone to return to, a why that mattered, they survived the most unimaginable conditions. Frankl came out at Auschwitz and wrote one of the most read books in history. He published the manuscript he'd mentally reconstructed on scraps of paper in a concentration camp. That is the power of Ikigai. And here's the counterintuitive part, and this is something the book really hammers. We don't need a friction-free life. We don't need fewer problems. We need a meaningful challenge that is genuinely, specifically ours. A life free of stress isn't a good life. It's a waiting room. Frankl once worked with a suicidal mother. She'd lost one son, and her other son had been paralyzed since birth. He asked her to imagine a parallel life, wealthy, comfortable, completely unburdened. Would that version of herself feel like she had lived well? She started crying. No, that version of herself would feel empty, but her real life, exhausting, heartbreaking, demanding as it was full. She had a reason to stay. Your Ikigai is not a job title. It's not a passion project. It's the responsibility you voluntarily shouldered. The thing that needs you.
Flow and the war on multitasking.
I need to tell you something uncomfortable. Every time you multitask, every time you answer emails while half watching something, or scroll while eating, or text while walking, you are actively making yourself less intelligent. This isn't just anecdote. Stanford researchers studied chronic multitaskers and found they were worse at filtering irrelevant information, worse at switching between tasks, and worse at holding things in working memory, compared to people who simply focused on one thing at a time. The researchers expected multitaskers to be better at all of it. They were worse, across the board. Multitasking doesn't just lower productivity, it makes flow biologically impossible. Flow. The term was coined by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and if you've ever been so absorbed in something that you looked up and 2 hours had vanished, you've been there. That's flow. The ego dissolves, the internal chatter stops. You are completely, fully present with one thing. The Japanese have a word for someone who has mastered flow, takumi, an artisan. The authors of Ikigai visited a small factory in Kumano that makes high-end makeup brushes, the kind used by professional makeup artists. They were taken to a separate building, a quiet room, and introduced to the company's most important employee. They walked in, and she didn't even look up. She was sorting individual bristles, each one with her bare hands. Her movements were so fast and fluid that the photographers had to use a rapid shutter speed just to capture them. Every single brush the company produced passed through her hands, and she was, by every outward sign, completely happy. Not because the work was glamorous, because she had vanished into it. We see this pattern everywhere once you start looking. Hayao Miyazaki, the director behind Studio Ghibli, the man behind Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro, officially retired, announced it to the world. The next day, he went back to the studio and started drawing. He spends his fun days rendering tiny details on paper, not because someone's paying him, but because the work is his oxygen. But my work isn't meaningful like that. I hear you. Here's what the book says about that. You can manufacture flow anywhere. They call it microflow. There's a woman in Tokyo who operates a supermarket elevator. She's been pressing the same buttons since 2004, but she doesn't just press buttons. She has choreographed the whole routine into something beautiful. A bow here, a greeting there, fluid and precise. She turned a completely routine job into a form of craft. Bill Gates washes his own dishes every night. He made up rules for himself, how to stack them, how to rinse them efficiently, because he found that turning it into a little system gave him a genuine moment of flow at the end of the day. The point isn't the task, it's the quality of attention you bring to it. Flow isn't something that happens to lucky people with interesting jobs. It's a skill, and like any skill, it requires protection. One clear goal, a challenge just slightly beyond your comfort zone, 0 distractions. That's the recipe, nothing fancy, just ruthless attention to one thing at a time. So, purpose found, focus built. But none of this works if the body breaks down too early. Let's talk about the one eating rule that Okinawans live by and why it's the opposite of everything we do.
Hara Hachi Bu and the architecture of longevity.
Before every meal, Okinawans say a phrase, Hara Hachi Bu. It means, fill your belly to 80%. That's it. That's the rule. Stop eating when you still have room for a little more. Not when you're stuffed, not when the plate's empty, when you're about 80% there. Why does this work? Because there's a lag between your stomach and your brain. It takes roughly 20 minutes for your body to register that it's full. By the time you feel stuffed, you've already overeaten, significantly. Okinawans simply stop before they get to that point. The science backs this up completely. Calorie restriction, eating less without malnutrition, is one of the most consistently proven longevity interventions in biology. It reduces a protein called IGF-1, which is heavily implicated in cellular aging. Okinawan centenarians eat an average of 1,800 to 1,900 calories a day. The American average is 3,300. That gap is enormous. But here's the clever part. They don't feel deprived. A typical Okinawan meal is served on 5 small plates. Not one large plate, 5 small ones. Visually, your brain registers abundance. Look at all this food. And that psychological trick naturally prevents overeating. You feel like you've had a feast. Their diet is also wildly diverse. Studies show Okinawan centenarians eat an average of 18 different foods per day, mostly vegetables, tofu, sweet potato, fish. Simple, seasonal, varied. But food is only part of it. There's a social structure built into Okinawan life that I think might be the most underrated longevity tool of all. It's called a moai. A moai is an informal group, typically formed in childhood or early adulthood, of people who look out for each other for life. They meet regularly for dinners, games, shared hobbies. Each member makes a small monthly financial contribution to a communal fund. That money covers their activities. And if someone in the group hits a genuine financial emergency, they can draw from it. Think about what that actually is. It's a mutual aid society made up of your closest friends. It's emotional insurance and financial insurance in one. And the effect on chronic stress, particularly the low-grade ambient anxiety of feeling alone and financially precarious, is profound. Studies consistently show that loneliness is as damaging to lifespan as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The moai is the Okinawan answer to that. Tonight, try serving dinner on smaller plates. Stop eating when you still want a bit more. And look at your closest relationships. Are you building something that looks like a moai? Now, eating well and having good friends is easy to manage when life is going smoothly. What about when it isn't? What do the Okinawans do when the world falls apart?
Wabi-sabi and becoming anti-fragile.
Here's how most people handle anxiety and negative emotion. They fight it. They try to suppress it, push through it, or distract themselves from it. And the harder they fight, the worse it gets. The founder of Morita therapy, a Japanese psychological framework, explained this with a simple image. Imagine a donkey tied to a post. The donkey panics and starts pulling. It walks in circles around the post, pulling on the rope. And the more it pulls, the more tangled it becomes, until it's completely immobilized, not by the post, but by its own struggle against the rope. Human emotions work exactly like that donkey. The Morita approach and the Okinawan worldview broadly says, feel the fear, feel the sadness. Don't try to control it or eliminate it. Observe it like you'd observe weather. Then ask, what do I need to do right now? Not how do I make this feeling go away? What is the next action I need to take? This acceptance of imperfection runs so deep in Japanese culture that it has its own aesthetic philosophy, wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the belief that beauty lives in things that are flawed, incomplete, and impermanent. A cracked teacup that's been repaired with gold, a practice called kintsugi, is considered more beautiful than a perfect one because the cracks are part of the story. They're evidence of a life actually lived. But there's a third level beyond acceptance and resilience. Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls it antifragility, and this is where it gets really interesting. Fragile things break under pressure. Resilient things survive it. They bounce back to exactly where they were. But anti-fragile things, they get better when they're harmed. They grow from the shock. The mythological example is the Hydra. Cut off one head, two grow back. That's anti-fragility. After the devastating 2011 tsunami in Japan, some coastal towns were effectively finished, ghost towns that never recovered. But others, like Ishinomaki, rebuilt rapidly and came back more vibrant and more connected than before. Same disaster, completely different outcomes. The difference wasn't luck, it was the social and structural redundancies those communities had built in advance. In Ogimi, every single senior interviewed had more than one occupation, a primary job and a secondary one, usually a small vegetable garden with the produce sold at the local market. Not because they needed the money, because that redundancy meant that if one thing failed, their sense of purpose didn't collapse with it. If your entire identity, your entire income, and your entire social life are tied to one thing, you are fragile. The Okinawan instinct is to diversify. Multiple income sources, multiple social groups, multiple reasons to get up tomorrow. Stop building a perfectly safe life. Embrace the cracks. Build redundancies. When chaos arrives, and it always does, you don't want to just survive it. You want to come out the other side, bigger. Let's go back to where we started. That Sunday neurosis, that hollow dread at 4 p.m. when the distractions stop and you're left alone with yourself. That feeling isn't a sign that you're working too hard, it's a sign that you're working on the wrong things. You've been sold a story that the goal of human life is to eventually escape, to get somewhere peaceful where nothing demands anything of you. But that destination doesn't exist, and even if it did, it would kill you. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz on scraps of paper and sheer purpose. The Takumi artisan found transcendence sorting bristles.
The 90-year-olds in Ogimi are still gardening, still contributing, still needed by their moai, and they are, by every measure, more alive than most people half their age. The pattern is the same everywhere you look. True happiness isn't the absence of demands. It's the presence of something that matters enough to demand your full attention. You don't cure Sunday neurosis by resting more. You cure it by caring more. When you combine the relentless pursuit of your Ikigai with the deep focus of a flow state, the physical discipline of Hara Hachi Bu, and the psychological fortress of an anti-fragile Wabi-sabi mindset, you don't just feel better. You become harder to break, more alive, more yours. You stop waiting for life to start. You start living it now.
One thing to carry with you from this video: your Ikigai is not a destination. It's not a grand revelation that arrives one day and solves everything. It's a daily practice, a daily act of paying attention to the intersection of 4 things: what you love, what you're genuinely good at, what the world actually needs, and what someone would pay you for. The Okinawans don't treat these as separate categories to optimize individually. They treat the overlap as a living, breathing practice, something you return to every day, adjust, refine, and recommit to. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. If money was completely removed from the equation, and you were legally forbidden from ever retiring, what is the one specific thing you'd still wake up and do tomorrow morning, just for the pure, stubborn love of doing it? Think about that, write it down, and then, even if it's just for 20 minutes today, go do it. See you on the next one. Bye.